Hi, welcome back. Okay, we're going to talk about data management, okay, with respect to data management, specifically databases. Now, when we think about databases, this is really the meat of what we do with respect to information systems management, with our information systems, because it's about the information, and where is information typically stored? In some type of database. So having a foundational or a fundamental understanding of database management is critical for not only our networks, but for the information and for the company, for the organizations that we support. Okay, let's get into this. So what we're going to cover, we're going to talk about database components, some different things with database models, SQL, structured query language, going to get into these, as well as we're going to hit on big data analytics throughout the entire course. So when we think about database components, it starts with what? You guessed it. Yeah, data. Data, that's the building blocks of our information. If you remember in earlier teachers, I had the inverted triangle, the DIKW model, data, information, knowledge, wisdom. It starts with data. And how we manage data, and how we maintain its relevancy, its accuracy, is really important to good decision making. And good decision making is what causes an organization really to survive. So where is data stored and captured? Like I say, in a database. Database is what? It's a shared integrated computer structure that stores a collection of end user data and raw facts of interest to end users. Really, that's the layer where we store and manage data. Now, how are databases managed with a DBMS, a database management system? You're thinking, are these the same on a database, on a database management system the same? No. Think about this. A database could be a recipe. Let's say you like to cook. A recipe could be a 3x5 card with data, with a recipe written on it for mac and cheese, spicy mac and cheese. Now, not only do I make mac and cheese, but I also make banana puddings and sweet potato pies and coconut pies and everything else. So now I have multiple 3x5 cards with data on it. So now that becomes a database. Now I can share these cards with everyone. Now I need a way of managing those 3x5 cards. So I go buy me one of these little Rolodexes, a little index box. So now I can put these cards in here in alphabetical order. So now I have a DBMS, a database management system. So you see there's a fundamental difference between a database and a database management system. Metadata. You may have heard this term quite a bit, like metadata. What is metadata? Metadata is data about data. Okay, I know he's like, well, that sounds kind of oxymoronic. No. It basically describes the data. And if you have a phone, which most of us do, and for most of us, the phone we have has a camera on it, right? Well, when you took a picture, that camera collected, that picture, that digital image is basically a collection of data. Now, what you can do if you download that, or really you just look on your phone itself, and now you will see metadata about that picture. It'll tell you the time of day that picture was taken. It'll also tell you the settings, the aperture setting, the shutter speed, the ISO setting. All of the pertinent information about that picture is captured on your camera as well. So you can pull all that, the file size, all of that is data about the data. The picture itself is data. But then there's data associated with the picture about data. So that's what metadata, when you hear that term metadata, data about data. Let's look at some database terminology you may also hear. Entity. Wow. What is an entity? Well, it's something that data is collected on. Data on something, from an attribute, whether it could be a customer data, student data, course data. And it's conceptual, meaning that it's something I can see, I can understand what that is. So that's what an entity is. Now, we also talk about, with respect to data, you heard this term called a field. And that is the attributes of an entity. What do we mean by that? So if I have an entity, like a customer, now, what are some of the attributes of that customer? The customer's name, the customer's address, customer's phone number. Those are all attributes about that entity called the customer. Things that I want to know about that customer that I want to maintain. And each of those are kept in a field. Now, with a record, I can say if you just kind of look at a spreadsheet, that's a single row of occurrence of related fields separated by columns. That's a customer record. So I have an entity who's a customer. That customer has attributes, is name, address, all these things. And when I put all that in on that one customer, that is a record. Now I can have multiple customers, and I would have multiple records or multiple rows within my database. A table, what is a table? Now, like I say, when I start having multiple rows, that is a collection of records. So now that table, I can have a customer address table. And that table has the records contains fields about the entity of every customer within my business, within my organization. Now that we've got all this stuff together, tables and records and fields, we have to have some way of identifying things that are unique. Okay, and that's what we call a primary key. A primary key is something that's a unique identifier. And let's say if I just used an address field and I just put the city, the state, and the street. Well, I can have customers that all live in Texas. I can have customers that all live in Dallas, and I can have customers that all live on Meadowview Drive. So up to this point, I have nothing that is unique that would identify each customer. Even the name. Why? Because I could have multiple John Smiths that live on Meadowview Drive in Dallas, Texas. So now I need to have something that is unique to each customer. Now I can do that myself. I can have a customer ID that I assign to them, or I could use their phone number. I could use their social security number. I would recommend that. But I could assign them each a unique customer ID. And then that becomes a primary field, because now I can find, or I can search, I can sort on each customer uniquely with that primary field. Another type of field we're going to talk about is a foreign field. That's a field that is in a relational table that relates a primary key into another table. So now let's say if I have multiple tables. I have one table that has your address in it, and let's say I have another table that has your educational information in it. Well, how can I relate those two together? Well, I can have one field in both tables that are the same, such as the customer ID. If that field is in both tables, then I can relate those two together. And all this comes together into what we call a schema. And think about that word schema as just as a blueprint of how we want our database constructed so that we can input and extract data or information in a way that we can understand it. So when we talk about a DBMS, a database management system, again, much bigger than just a database itself. It is all the components that go along with that, from the end user to the actual management system itself, application, data, all the data structure, what type of metadata, all the information that's associated with each record, and that becomes our database management systems. And what a DBMS does, it really improves data sharing, security, and better integration, and it helps us to minimize data inconsistency. This is probably one of the biggest that we could, that you want to do with managing data, is reduce data inconsistencies. And what do you mean by that? Well, if you build a database and you don't structure it properly, to where you can have fields locked down, you can have drop downs where people have to select certain things, then people will start inputting their own information. And now you don't have a way to consistent data to be able to make decisions off of. And when we talk about database management systems, there is a plethora, yes, of database management systems. Access, Oracle, Teradata, IBM, DB2. I mean, the list goes on and on. SQL, MySQL. There's just a ton of Postgres, of database management systems. So you may say, all right, so what's the difference between a database and just a regular file system? I open my computer, I got files, or I got files all over the place. I got spreadsheets. So what is the difference? So when you think about a file system, right, within an organization, the personnel department, they've got their files. Sales department may have their files. The accounting department, they have their files. Well, now I have this here again, inconsistent data based on a file system. Data is stored in independent files. Requires a lot of programming. Difficult to perform queries. Any type of ad hoc query. Very, very difficult to do that. Excuse me. System administration is complex because each of these file systems may be a different tool. You may have a different vendor that's providing a different type of structure. Security may be inadequate. File sharing, how we share files across this organization now could be difficult. Where now, with a database, a DBMS, a database management system, now we can still have those same departments. We got personnel, sales, accounting. They all now flow through a DBMS. That's a structured way of doing business. Now we have a central repository. We can manage security. Now I will say, that's kind of a double-headed sword there when we talk about security, because now if this becomes corrupt, everything is corrupt. One thing about security here, if this is corrupt, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to corrupt these others. So just remember that. But however, from a security management perspective, it makes it easier for me to apply security controls to protect that across the board. Data transformation and presentation. Yeah, now I can pull data from personnel, sales, and accounting easily if I need to present this to upper management. It makes backup and recovery much easier, much cleaner way of doing that. And now we can do queries. I can do standard queries. Now I can write a query that can pull data based on a single customer. And now I can see his activity based on his personnel records, sales records, and accounting. So it brings a lot of those pieces together. So that's what we talk about. Now, in our next section, we're going to get into data models. We'll be right back.